The fact that you are looking at this screen right now is not an accident. You did not stumble here randomly. Perhaps you have been scrolling through your phone since this morning. Perhaps you ended a long and exhausting day by clicking on something. Anything. Hoping it might give you something you cannot quite name. But something brought you here, and that something is worth paying attention to, because within each human being, there exists what we might call an inner signal, a quiet but persistent pull toward growth, toward meaning, toward becoming more fully oneself. Most people live their entire lives without ever truly listening to that signal. You, however, are listening right now, and that is not a small thing. Let me ask you something honest. Have you been feeling different lately? Not necessarily worse, just different. As if the person you were 6 months ago or 2 years ago has begun to feel like a costume that no longer fits quite right? As if the things that once excited you now leave you strangely hollow. As if in your conversations with people, even people you love, there is a subtle distance, a gap in frequency. As if you are broadcasting on a channel they are not tuned into. If any of that resonates with you, I want you to understand something important. What you are experiencing is not a breakdown. It is not a disorder. It is not something to suppress or medicate away. What you are experiencing is one of the most significant and underappreciated psychological transitions a human being can undergo. It is the quiet, sometimes painful, but ultimately magnificent process of becoming who you actually are. Most people live their lives along a straight, predictable line. They are born, they grow, they go to school, they find work, they fulfill social roles, they age, and there is nothing wrong with that life. It is safe, it is legible, it is understandable, but there is another kind of life, one that moves not in a straight line, but in an ever-deepening spiral. Each revolution of that spiral brings greater self-awareness, greater psychological complexity, greater depth of feeling, and yes, sometimes greater pain, but also, and this is the part most people never reach, greater freedom, greater aliveness, greater capacity to experience what it truly means to be human. You are standing at one of those critical turns in the spiral right now. The question is not whether you will move. Life always moves. The question is in which direction. Will you contract back into the familiar, or will you expand into what you are genuinely capable of becoming? The psychology of human growth tells us that this is not a rhetorical question. It is the defining question of a human life. Here is what no one tells you about growth. When you begin to move toward your higher potential, when some part of you stirs and starts reaching for something more authentic, more meaningful, your psyche will resist. Not because growth is dangerous, but because the ego is deeply invested in stability. The ego has built an entire architecture of identity around what is known, what is predictable, what is safe. And when something threatens that architecture, the ego sounds an alarm. This is too uncertain. Go back. You are not ready. This is not for you. But I want you to hear this clearly, that resistance is not wisdom. That resistance is simply the price of admission into a larger life. The question worth sitting with is this: what if the life on the other side of that discomfort is more genuine, more nourishing, more deeply satisfying than the one you have been living? Would you still stay where you are? Or would you begin, slowly, imperfectly, bravely, to build something new? There is a concept I want you to understand that I believe sits at the very heart of human psychology. Throughout most of our lives, we are not living as ourselves. We are living as our roles: the parent, the professional, the responsible one, the agreeable one, the strong one, the one who does not ask for too much. These roles are not lies exactly. They contain pieces of us, but they are not the whole truth of who we are. They are performances we have refined over years, often decades, in response to what the world seemed to require of us. Psychologists call this the social self, the face we present to the world. And for most people, the social self becomes so automatic, so deeply grooved, that they genuinely cannot tell where the role ends and the real person begins. But somewhere beneath those roles, quieter, older, more essential, there is something else. A layer of self that was never fully shaped by external expectation. A core that has its own nature, its own values, its own way of perceiving the world. And that deeper self, what we might call the authentic self, does not simply disappear because we have spent years ignoring it. It waits, it sends signals. And when the gap between who we are performing and who we actually are becomes too wide, those signals get louder. What are those signals? Restlessness without a clear cause. A creeping sense of meaninglessness in activities that should feel fulfilling. A hunger for something you cannot quite articulate. a recurring feeling that your life, despite its outer adequacy, is somehow not yours. These are not symptoms of pathology. These are symptoms of psychological depth. These are your authentic self, knocking on the door. Human beings do not grow in comfort. We grow in the tension between where we are and where we are capable of going. Every significant psychological transition involves a kind of dissolution before it involves a reconstruction. The person you were at 20 had to partially dissolve for the person you became at 30 to emerge. The beliefs you held in one chapter of your life had to loosen and sometimes collapse entirely before new understanding could take root. This is not failure. This is the natural rhythm of psychological maturation. What you may be feeling right now, the sense of groundlessness, of not quite knowing where you belong or what you want, of feeling simultaneously too old for your past and not yet arrived at your future. This is not a sign that something has gone wrong. This is what genuine transition feels like from the inside. It is disorienting by design because it is asking you to release your grip on an identity that no longer fully serves you. And yes, releasing a familiar identity, even one that is limiting, is painful. We build our sense of security on what we know. Even a cage feels like home after enough time. But the cage is not who you are. It is only where you have been. There is a dimension of the human psyche that receives very little attention in ordinary life, and yet it may be the most important dimension of all. I'm speaking about what we might call the shadow. That collection of aspects of ourselves that we have judged to be unacceptable, that we learned early in life to push away, to hide, to deny. The anger we were told was ugly. The ambition we were told was selfish. The need for recognition we were told was vanity. The boundaries we were told were cruelty. One by one, piece by piece, we moved these parts of ourselves into the psychological basement and locked the door. But they did not disappear. They simply became unconscious. And what lives in the unconscious does not cease to operate. It operates without our awareness, which is precisely what makes it powerful. Those locked away parts show up in our patterns, in the relationships we keep recreating, in the self-sabotage we cannot explain, in the irrational anger, in the inexplicable fear. We experience these patterns as fate, as just the way things are, but they are not fate. They are unexamined psychology. The path toward wholeness, toward what we might call full psychological health, runs directly through those locked parts, not around them, not above them, through them. This does not mean becoming your darkest impulses. It means doing the courageous, often uncomfortable work of acknowledging what is already there, of seeing it clearly, of integrating it consciously into your understanding of yourself. Because the moment you bring something into conscious awareness, it loses its power to run your life from the dark. Here's a useful mirror for beginning that work. Pay attention to the qualities in other people that provoke your strongest reaction. The person whose arrogance infuriates you beyond proportion, is there a part of your own worth and ambition you have been suppressing? The person whose apparent selfishness disgusts you. Have you perhaps been so thoroughly taught to put others first that your own needs have become invisible to you? What disturbs us in others often reflects what we have refused to acknowledge in ourselves. This is not an accusation. This is an invitation to get honest, with genuine compassion, about the full, complex, contradictory human being that you actually are. Now I want to bring you to what I consider the central aspiration of human psychological life. Beyond safety, beyond belonging, beyond esteem, beyond the careful management of social approval and external validation, there is a further possibility for human beings. A possibility that most people sense but few ever fully inhabit. The possibility of becoming, as fully as one is able, what one is genuinely capable of being. This is not about achievement in the conventional sense. It is not about accumulating more, acquiring more, impressing more. It is about something fundamentally different. The experience of living in genuine alignment with your deepest nature, of bringing your actual values, your actual perceptions, your actual ways of experiencing the world into your daily life, rather than leaving them permanently backstage. When a human being begins to move in this direction, when they start to peel away the layers of social conditioning and role performance and fear-based self-censorship, something remarkable happens. Life begins to feel more real. Relationships deepen. Ordinary moments carry unexpected richness. Problems that once seemed paralyzing become navigable. Not because the external world has changed, but because the person meeting the world has changed. You do not become more by adding more. You become more by removing what was never truly yours to begin with. So what does this actually require? It requires, first and most fundamentally, a willingness to be still. We live in a civilization that is extraordinarily skilled at preventing stillness. There's always another notification, another distraction, another demand on attention. And I want to suggest to you that this is not entirely accidental, because stillness is where we meet ourselves. And meeting ourselves honestly is genuinely uncomfortable, especially at first. I'm asking you to try something. 15 minutes each day. No phone, no music, no content, just you and the interior of your own experience. Sit with what arises. Do not judge it. Do not push it away. Do not chase after it. Simply observe. Learn the texture of your own inner life. At first, this will feel strange, possibly tedious, possibly anxiety-provoking. Thoughts you have been avoiding will surface. Feelings you buried will ask for attention. This is not a malfunction. This is the process working as it should. The more consistently you do this, the more you practice genuine inner attention, the more you will begin to notice something shift. The noise that once filled every available moment will begin to resolve into something quieter and more legible. Intuitions will sharpen. Clarity about what you actually value, as opposed to what you have been told to value, will slowly emerge. The static will begin to clear. And here is something quite remarkable that you may begin to notice. As your inner world becomes more coherent, the outer world seems to respond in kind. The right conversation arrives at the right moment. The question you have been carrying meets an unexpected answer. The resource you needed appears when you needed it. This is not mysticism. It is tzbasis. It is the psychology of attention. When you become clearer internally, you become more capable of perceiving and acting on what was always available to you, but previously invisible. Let me tell you something about human potential that I believe with great conviction. Every human being carries within them, from the very beginning, not earned, not contingent on performance or worthiness, a genuine and irreducible core of self. Not the role, not the reputation, not the accumulated achievements or failures. The self, the actual, essential, particular nature of this specific human being that no one else has ever been or ever will be. Society, in its understandable but often misguided effort to create functional and conforming citizens, teaches people from a very young age that they are not yet enough, that they need to become something before they can be worthy of their own full life. Perform better, achieve more, fit the template more precisely. And underneath all of this teaching runs a quiet, deeply damaging current. You are incomplete as you are, but this is not true. It has never been true. You were not born incomplete. You were born whole, and then gradually the wholeness was covered over by the things you were taught to be ashamed of, the parts of yourself you learned to hide, the authentic responses you trained yourself to suppress in order to remain safe and accepted and loved. The work of psychological maturation is not the work of becoming something you are not. It is the work of recovering what was always, underneath everything, already there. The sculptor does not add to the stone. The sculptor removes what was obscuring the form that the stone already contained. You are engaged in exactly that kind of work. I want to be clear with you about one thing. This is not a process with a fixed endpoint. You will not one day arrive at a final, perfected version of yourself and declare the journey complete. Growth does not work that way. Every new level of self-understanding opens onto another. Every layer of authenticity recovered reveals another layer waiting beneath it. This can feel daunting, but I want to invite you to consider it differently. To stop growing is, in a very real sense, to stop living. The human being who has given up on becoming, who has decided that who they are is fixed and finished, has made a kind of internal surrender that shows up in every dimension of their life, in the flatness of their days, in the absence of genuine curiosity, in the slow dimming of what was once alive in them. But the human being who remains genuinely engaged in their own becoming, who treats each day as an opportunity to understand themselves and the world a little more honestly, that person remains genuinely alive in a way that has nothing to do with age or circumstance. You are here because some part of you is still reaching. Some part of you has not given up on the possibility of a life that is more fully your own. That reaching is not naive. It is not self-indulgent. It is the most essentially human thing about you. So here is what I am asking of you. Not a dramatic gesture, not a radical life upheaval overnight, just a decision, made quietly, made sincerely, to take your own inner life seriously, to pay attention to what is actually happening inside you with the same rigor and curiosity you might bring to anything else you genuinely care about. Look honestly at the patterns in your life. Ask what they are telling you about what you have been avoiding. Sit with discomfort instead of immediately seeking relief from it. Begin to notice the difference between what you actually value and what you have simply been conditioned to pursue. And, perhaps most importantly, be willing to extend to yourself the same compassion you would offer to someone you love who is doing exactly this difficult and necessary work. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are a human being in the middle of the deeply natural, deeply demanding, ultimately deeply rewarding process of becoming more fully yourself. That process brought you here today. Where it takes you next is up to you. But the fact that you are listening, that you are genuinely, sincerely listening, tells me something important about you. It tells me that you have not given up. And that, more than anything else, is where every meaningful journey begins. If something in these words resonated with something real in you, share them. Not for the sake of numbers or metrics, but because somewhere out there, someone else is in the middle of the same quiet struggle. And knowing they are not alone might be exactly what they need to keep going. The journey inward is the longest journey, but it is also the only one that leads anywhere that truly matters.